Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see, this is episode 23 of my channel news. So I have 23 episodes of strictly channel news, and overall, this is my 101st video. So back on December 30th of 2016, I put up my very first YouTube video. And, over the course of, just a little over 2 years, I've, I've hopefully managed to, put together some interesting content for, people to, subscribe and like and, comment on and, hopefully even share. So, what I'm doing today is I'm kind of combining up several different aspects in one video. So instead of having separate videos for each thing, my channel news is going to, focus on two other elements, a new feature that I just started, and that feature will be in its second episode now, and I'll go into a little bit of detail with that. And a slight mishap that I had today while getting my modem, changed and, repaired. I was having some problems with it and, had to move some furniture around so that the guy could get in there. And I picked up one of my more prized possessions and, had a little mishap. So go to the bad news and then to the next phase of this presentation. So I had joined in the Kickstarter of Sword Coast Legends. It's a computer-based game that was put out by a company I can't even remember now, but the box that came with with the collector's edition, included a Balrog model. So I mean, if you've ever seen it before, I mean, here's his head, and it mounts onto the body, and I will bring this up. So it is really quite a huge figure. And so when you put the head on and you have the body here, let me get the camera right. I mean, it's a pretty impressive figure. You'll notice that the wings are not on, and that's because when the wings are inserted in and then you put the head on, and the headpiece kind of holds the wings in place. And then he was in his base, so I was carrying him. And of course, as you can see by the title, You Shall Not Pass, he didn't quite make it to where I was bringing him over. So the wings, and this is the broken one, the wings go into, let's see, the wings go into the body piece like this, and you can see where this section of his wing obviously came off and broke. And so now it'll be, I was never intending to ever get rid of it, sell it or anything like that. It's a pretty clean, smooth break, so I will be able to hopefully super glue it together and then, put it someplace a lot safer than where I had it, where I didn't have, don't have to move it around as much. So, put you over there. My youngest daughter actually hated this thing. She hated coming into the room with it up on, even though it was up on the top. She was really quite afraid of it. 2 years ago, she was probably only 11 years old, or possibly even 10 at the time. So that's that. So before I actually switch screens, I'm going to do a little setup here. My previous RPG discussion episode was about dice and how I discovered some differences in the way the numbers are actually imprinted on dice. And I was wondering if that had an effect on the outcome of multiple rolls, if it really mattered where they were. And on that video, I actually included two articles, or at least two links, where they were discussing, that one basically said that there's really no difference, and then the other was saying, well, there might actually be a difference. So I wanted to get into another pondering that I had with what we're doing here, and that's participating in the RPG community in whatever capacities that we do. And I know this term has been around for quite a while, and I wanted to get involved in a discussion with it. So I'm going to switch screens, and you will see what we'll be talking about. So my RPG discussion number 2 is, what does OSR stand for? And most importantly, what does it stand for you? I've heard different words or terminology for this acronym. So I've heard old school. Old school is uniform. So everyone says old school, and then it's the R that I believe might make a difference. All right. So old school Renaissance is probably the most frequently used. I've heard old school revival, which I'll get into why revival and Renaissance might be slightly different, and then old school role playing. And the reason why I put these images up here, I chose them, on purpose, and so we have Dungeons and Dragons, a box set, the earliest box set that I actually own, and that was 1980. This is Call of Cthulhu. I believe it might be second edition. Still 1981-ish when this game came out. I have Star Frontiers, which only has one edition of Star Frontiers. Bushido, same thing, only one edition of Bushido. I believe Top Secret is now in its third edition. I believe it's called Top Secret World. And then we have Basic Fantasy. All right, and when we look at these, these 6 covers, you might be inclined to say, well, one of these games is not like the others. One of these games is not just the same. And so my question is, is it different, and why is it different? And I think that goes to what your definition of what OSR stands for. Now, basic fantasy role-playing game is, probably, at least in my experience, the most prominent of the OSR games. It's the game that most people, talk about as being the benchmark or the baseline, or of the OSR movement. And basically, what it's touted to be is it's touted to the old rule style of gameplay, and and when I get to my definition of old school role playing, I don't mean role playing in just the character or player aspect of how we role play our characters. When I say role playing, I'm talking about actually playing the games. So when I think of old school role playing, I'm more specifically talking about playing Dungeons and Dragons, but playing Dungeons and Dragons in its first edition, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. When I look at Call of Cthulhu is in its 7th edition. All right. OSR to me means that I'm not playing editions 2 through, or really 3 through 7. I'm looking to play Call of Cthulhu first edition, or at the latest 2nd edition. Star Frontiers there's no other additional editions. Bushido, same thing, no additional editions. Top Secret, there's potentially 3. I own the first edition, so if I'm going to play Top Secret, being an OSR player myself, I would prefer to play first edition rather than, any of the other editions. So, so that's my definition of it. Now, I know when people talk about, old school Renaissance versus old school revival, and I'm going to get into that difference, at least in my mind. A revival means that you're going back to the way, you're going back to the way it is, and you're trying to bring the game to people in that current form. So I'm trying to spread the word of D&D First Edition, or a D&D First Edition, or Top Secret First Edition. Old School Renaissance, all right, and the difference between Renaissance and Revival means that, yeah, you're going back to those older systems, but you're using a newer game to do it. And the newer game doesn't have to be exactly like the old game. All right. Perhaps its core has to be, or its overall feel has to be, the same as the older game, but it can add some newer elements to it. And so it's kind of the difference between, invention and innovation. Renaissance means that you can take the old and update it, and expose new players to it, and they would still get, a taste of both the old and the new. While as revival means, oh no, we're going to be very strict and we're just going to play the first, second, or third, no, probably just first or second, like I was saying earlier, the first or second edition, or just the first edition, which I've seen some people argue is that, you really should be playing just the first edition of a lot of these games. So, I mean, that's basically, where, I'm going with this is that I'd like to know, what others, what others believe on this point. You know, does it really matter? I mean, who cares what they're calling it as long as we're getting more and more people, in the role playing community actually playing games, and so, as they start learning new systems, it's always good to see where those older systems might have laid some of the groundwork. But anyway, that's my discussion, topic for the week is OSR, and what does OSR mean for you? If this is your first time visiting my channel, I welcome you. I hope that you look back into some of the older videos and find some enjoyment and inspiration in them. And if you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to subscribe. If you like alerts, like to be alerted when I put up new videos, just click on the bell, and then on the second click, it'll give you an option to follow, and that way you'll get those alerts. Certainly leave comments. Any comments on this topic that I brought up today, your opinion on what OSR means, and or if you have any other, unrelated topics, you can certainly include those. If you're backing a Kickstarter that is RPG related, whether it be computer or tabletop, doesn't matter. But if you're backing something, or if you're running your own Kickstarter and you'd like to get that put out there, like to have me take a look at it and see, I certainly welcome you to advertise your products. I like to support other developers out there that are kind of small time developers, as opposed to the big two or three companies that are out there. And I found a lot of really good gaming materials, on Kickstarter and by these small developers, independent developers, and it's really impressive to watch as some of them grow, and I've actually been following at least one or two different developers now for the last couple of years. Modifies being one of them, which I'm sure they're not small in Europe, but they were fairly small, at least to my exposure here. And so I like some of the games that they've put out. Another much smaller independent company is like Bloat Games, and I've backed at least one of their products already, and backed the second one now. So he has several things coming down the pike, and so that's another thing to take a look at. But in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you over the next couple days and weeks. Hopefully, we'll cross paths on the screen someplace. Remember to subscribe. If you do use Facebook, go to the Facebook community, On Screen Gaming, in parentheses OSG, and that's my definition of or acronym for OSG. I know there's others out there as well. On-screen gaming is for any gaming that you can do on, whether it be a computer screen or a cell phone screen or a television screen with a console game. So anything game related on a screen. RPGs for the most part is what I'm really interested in. So once again, enjoy. Tomorrow's Friday, so hopefully some of you have an extended weekend, and have a good day.